Great, welcome everyone. It's exciting today to talk to you about how do we look at customer experience as well as being customer centric, right? But before we do that, just wanted to introduce our audience as well as myself. So maybe we'll start off on that side. We have Roel, they're from Standard Chartered, and Roel is the Chief Transformation and Technology and Operations Officer from Standard Chartered. So welcome, Roel. And then we also have Rachel from Meta. Rachel is the business director from Meta for Greater China, as well as we have Shinichi-san, who's the CEO and founder of Cash. And then we also have Kevin here, welcome, and from AMTD, who's the executive director at the insurance group. And myself, Alan, so I lead up our Deloitte digital practice as well as our consulting practice here for Southern China. All right, so to get us started, I'll ask the first question and learn more from our audience, our panelists here today. So first, my first question is, how can leaders build a customer success function and mindset at an organization level? So, Roel, do you want to take that away?
Sure. Let me try to answer that. Well, first of all, if you think about customers, right? Customers are something which is not just something for a top level of organization, or it's for sales, or it's for marketing. It's actually for everyone in an organization. And I think we all recognize that. The question is, how do you get there? And I think there's sort of three principles around it. The first one is around, if you want to permeate customer focus throughout the whole organization, you need to make sure that everyone is engaged on it. So for instance, I try in my meetings mostly to talk about, what would a customer think of this? And every activity you do, does it deliver value to the customer, directly or indirectly? If the question is no, why would you do it in the first place? So it's literally about how do you make sure you get a culture, you breed a culture of focus on customers. I think the second one is we all have the responsibility to drive and deliver on the customer experience on a day-to-day basis. That means you need to improve. Now, improve on one hand could be innovation, that's what most of us think about. Radical innovation, that's also, I guess, why we're here. We have SCV, Standard Chartered Ventures for that. But it's also about each and every one of us on a day-to-day basis do a little bit better and call that continuous improvement. That's a responsibility we all have, and that's what we try to drive through the teams. So later on this week, I've got something like 2,000 people on a VC who have worked on continuous improvement to really drive things forward. The third principle, I think, is technology, but technology oriented towards customers. Just think about it, right? We do so much with technology. We have technical debt, we have things we want to improve, but quite often we do it isolated. So the question is, how do you think forward from a customer lens and a customer perspective in terms of what do I need to do in order to move forward? So am I going to work on my technical debt, or I'm going to invest a little bit more for that specific element and move to something more radical and new? So it's around people, the first principle, basically. How do you really permeate it through the organization? The second one is process. How do you really make sure you ensure you have a customer orientation process? And the third one is technology. And then the last element, I would say, and that's, I think, the most important one, it's not just about those three individual things. It's about how you align them. It's about how you make sure they're balanced out in order to deliver to that customer experience. That's what I would say about it.
Right. Hey, thank you. Thanks, Roel. And Shinichi-san, you want to supplement on that?
Yeah, so before diving... Can you hear me? Before diving into customer success, I founded my startup in Tokyo in 2015 to serve much better customer experience in digital banking or challenger bank space. And I think it's to Japanese consumer, and I think customer success is really the two components to it. One is product developments and offerings. So what kind of product and services will we developed? And the other important component is those products had been utilized in their daily lives in the way that we wish to be. So we offer the services in the form of app. So mobile app, we don't have any branches. Usually incumbent banks have the branches to interact with the customers, but in the form of app, we cannot talk to the users directly. So in any reasons consumer downloaded our apps and started using it, they might end up using the services in the wrong way or not the suitable way that we wish for. So I think not only the product offering itself, but rather customer success really means if the customers really are leveraging our product in at most reasonable and ideal way in their daily life so that they can get best out of it. So I think in that regards, not only the product development side, but also the operation side and customer success team, they really need to work very, very closely. So I think our company, we divide the teams, but also very intentionally try to collaborate very, very closely between the product and also the operation side.
Great.
Yep.
Rachel
I think,
from
I would like to add on what Rose mentioned, how it is important to build a culture within the whole organization, why customer-centric or customer success is so important. So I totally agree that it is not the key to build a very successful customer-centric function or to promote a customer-first mindset within the customer-facing functions. But this is how to incorporate this, to infuse this mindset in how the core business or core products your company build. Right. So take Meta, our company, as an example. So as a social technology company. So we build products to help people connect, to help people build community, but we also build products or technologies to help business grow. And when we work with business, we understand that in order to make business succeed on our platform, it is very important for them to have the ability to engage with their customers on our platform in the way how users prefer or how users like to engage with their friends and family. So that is why a lot of products of Meta, a lot of ads or business tools on products were built or inspired by the actual behavior of users on our platform. And then we make sure people love that kind of interaction mode on our platform, and we develop that. And one of the very great example is business messaging, right? It is a very key trend nowadays. We see people love engaging with business through messaging, and that is why we build business messaging products to let business to engage with people through messengers or through WhatsApp. It is more scalable solutions. So and it becomes a very popular channels of how business and customer engage, and this is how we see why it is so important to put customer-centric or customer-first mindset within the whole organizations, from product design to customer-facing functions.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think this is a great question. First of all, at its surface, people think about the term customer success. It's really not about the companies, you as a supplier, your success. It's first of all, your customer has to be successful when they receive your solution or product, right? That's the number one thing. So what does that mean? You kind of break it down into what are you doing for your customer? What's the reason for your existence as a supply provider, right? That's the number one thing. For example, and this is true for every vertical, every line of business, or every mode of business, whether it's to B or to C. Just an example, right? In the insurance space, risk solution space, why do companies buy insurance in places, right? Like liability insurance or any kind of contractual insurance. It's not just for the sake of protection. It's sometimes you got to think above and beyond that, one layer down the rabbit hole, because they have their contractual requirements to fill. Their customer, your customer's customer, requires them or wants them to have something in place that kind of protects back to back. And therefore, that translates into a deeper demand for that risk solution. That's just one example, right? So, and if it's a to C context, what are you doing in terms of A, what are you delivering? And B, how you're delivering that. Whether it's convenience or more efficient or more user-friendly engagement, that all value adds, right? So I think the second point is, of course, very important. The decision makers at the company supplying that solution, you have to create the buy-in. You have to buy in and really believe in that vision yourself, first of all, that the customer success is the most important reason for your existence in the first place. And then you transmit that vision and kind of value across the organization, across all departments. And you make it a point about your culture, about your objectives or KPIs or whatever you call it these days, that everybody is aligned on this culture and that we agree on this goal. And so once every staff from every level or every line has that agreed buy-in, nobody can blame anyone else but themselves if that objective or value or culture is not delivered. So
right? No, thanks, Kevin. No, and couldn't agree more, right? Because like what you said, it's not about internally, what do we think in the companies, right? But putting the customer in the middle, what do they really want? And then I think what's very important is, even throughout the organizations, as you guys talked about, be it it's from the sales team, marketing team, technology team, right, whatever, like the objective is not about just getting, or maybe the app go live. It's about, right, what are we developing? And what KPI are we chasing for the customer experience, right? And all developing to that. So no, I couldn't agree more. And I think one thing I wanted to add to that is when we talk about the people, right? And Roel talk about people is one important element, is that nowadays, I think what I appreciate is the diversity of people, which is so important, right? Because think about it, right? We different age of people or different personas use different digital technologies differently. I think that diversity and even young people to speak up and contributing, or even different gender contributing, I think it's all good, right? And I think that's tremendously crucial to the success of what we develop for our customers, because we have a good diversity of customers as well. But anyway, so let me move on to the second question. So how do companies look at designing the winning growth strategy while putting the customer-centric and being in the middle and to maximize benefits? Shinichi-san, do you want to get us started on that?
Yeah, I think to Kevin's point, I think that's great. And I think it's just a matter that who really is your customer, right? So I think customer segmentation and targets is really, really difficult, but also at the important things. So the growth, company's growth or business growth is a result of many things, right? But I think, having said that, those customer-centric or customer success-minded culture is a very, very important assets for the companies to be continuously delivering the good results, not only in terms of KPIs, but rather the quality or the value of the service itself. So I think there's many factors that eventually makes the growth at the certain stage or the certain environments, but I think the customer first or centric type of culture throughout the organization, I think that's really the important assets that other competitors could not imitate right after that. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, great point. I think I'll take it from a different vantage point in terms of talking about the economics of things, right? I think if you step back a little, take a look at the past 5 years, maybe 7, from the capital markets side or the primary rounds, investors have or operators alike, they've put more focus on the path to growth for the sake of growth, right? The kind of the way of thinking in the past 5 years has been, if you can, let's just focus on the clouds. Let's look at if your user base is growing at X percentage, your kind of GMV or premiums is growing at X percentage, then we take a leap of faith in thinking that will conclude in a certain valuation, in a certain earnings down the road. But I think so now the last 2 to 3 years has kind of really proven that, or demonstrated that it's not enough to take that leap of faith, right? You have to demonstrate early with a focus on the path to revenue, really, the path to earnings. And I think nowadays even more the path to positive unit economics. That is very important. That has been a little bit of a shift in the thinking. And part of that has to do with, of course, some kind of cyclicality in the macro economy, all of that factors. But I think a big part of that has always been you have to get back to the 1, 2, 3 of fundamentals, right? That will never go away, no matter how much money the Fed prints. So I think that is a very important consideration. Yeah.
Ro?
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to add on that because like when we work with a lot of companies like at Meta, we see when a lot of companies talk about growth, they usually focus a lot or put a lot of priority on how to acquire new users, right? But then instead, what we think is it is, if not more important, it is like also very important for you how to grow your existing customer because like they are the existing customer as a base. So those customers are like some are very valuable to you, and then a customer success journey means like it can brings in a good experience with the brand and promote like repeated purchase, retention, or ultimately advocacy. So it directly translates into like a better profit or a better customer lifetime journey, and then it leads to growth. So we always talk to like our partners like when you go to market, it is not just focusing on how you acquire new customers, but it is more important to how to make use of your existing customer base and grow them to become more valuable customers. And this is a more healthy customer growth strategy for company.
Great.
I'd like to add a few words into the question because growth for the sake of growth is never the growth that you want to have. So I would rather think about sustainable growth and just link it to the previous questions as well. And I think that's what we hear back from the panel, which is that it's not just about growing the number of customers you have, the revenue you have. Actually, it's quite easy to do. The question is that a sustainable way for you as a company, thinking long term, as Kevin already mentioned? If you start to think from a customer perspective, not just why do you get additional revenue or why do you get additional customers in, but why would they stay? And why would they actually increase their share of wallet or buy more products or services going forward? I think if you add those components in, the customer lens and the sustainable lens, that's when you really get to the growth that everyone wants to have. But you don't see that always. You do see short term. You do see trying to take some corner cuts. And in the end, that is not the way that I think you will be able to deliver in the long term.
Right. No, thanks, Roel. And agreed. Yeah, definitely agree to that, right? Because when you talk about sustainable growth, right, and also like Rachel talked about, it's about like the lifetime value, right? How much how you work dealing with the customers, right, or engaging with the customers, not just for the initial transaction, right, but how do we continue to work with them and engage with them and grow more of our business, right? And I think what I really like about Rachel talking about the customer experience, right, is also very core to having that sustainable growth. Because even just when we think about the simplest example, right, although people probably talk about this example for so long, right, when we talk about the Uber, right, the Airbnb, like all these things, it's not, well, when we look at it, right, especially from a consulting perspective, we have like what we call 10 types of innovation. And in the core of it, right, of the 10 types, a lot of it is about how do we, well, not only change the business model, but also change that experience, right? Same thing, Uber is a different experience, So I think, changing that experience and putting that at the core and building that lifetime value, well, I think is definitely important. Great, and then maybe the third question would be about how can organizations, right, tap and integrate all these data silos, right? We have so much data in the organizations, but how do we stitch them together and make good growth and good customer experience? Roel, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think it's linked to some of the things that we mentioned before, right? First of all, the question is, how come you end up with all these different data silos? And I guess my answer would be because we never thought about the architecture. It's a technical architecture, it's a journey architecture, customer service journey architecture. It's about what do you want to be when you grow up. If you do not have that picture, you'll see that you'll start to develop silos. So in a business perspective, you always need to understand, where do I want to end up? Because then you can start linking things together. If you don't, you get data for HR, for finance, for tech, for operations, and not only that, you get it for, in banks for instance, for consumers, for business, and you see all these little elements that you then have to knit together, and that's exactly the issue about it. So it starts with having the end in mind. What is it you want to move towards, and work backwards from there, and integrate the architects, business architects, as well as technical architects, into delivering that future vision, and work backwards from there.
Anyone? Kevin?
Well, Roel is very much the expert on this topic, but maybe I'll take it from a layman's kind of view of this question, right? If you think about it, if you're on your own personal PC, if you've got your notes, your working scattered across a number of apps, right? You have your Apple Notes, or you put it in Draft, or Notion, or Google Docs. It's never going to work. It's going to be a nightmare, right? So take that and extrapolate to a corporate level. It's just going to be degrees of more complexity, right? So I think the takeaway is what Roel said, right? A key is really centralization or standardization of the data governance and the standards. So everybody is talking to each other in the same language. You speak the same thing, and then you can start having a workable set of data. But then extrapolating that, how do you take that and really inform your experiences? How do you inform your kind of product development to make it a closed feedback loop? Yeah.
Yeah, I think data-driven and centralizing the data, or like a quantitative approach, is very key. I think we have been saying the customer success is very important, and I think in the terms of qualitative, like the state, and also the quantitative state needs to be like aligned. So I think even though we say, we want to approach to this type of users by what kind of figures, but I think centered like a data approach in centralized way, that would support a lot of like a quantitative alignment throughout the organization. So as the roles explained, I think reverse engineering the best case user, like, the behaviors in our services, and reverse engineer that. And then, hey, maybe this type of users with the ARPU of which dollars. And I think this, not only the qualitative measures, but quantitative measures that can be found in the data. So I think that wants to be centralized so that all the departments or the sectors can really follow from there. So I think that's really important to have those two different components, quantitative and quantitative approach.
Yeah, so I think the three gentlemen talk a lot about data and like the system, how to have technology enablement to prevent data silo. Maybe I can take a step back to talk more about like the culture within the company. I think even though like with the availability of data, with the availability of technology, sometimes like when organizations grow bigger and different functions just focus on what they work and their own KPI and goal, like they rarely talk to each other and don't know like what others are doing. So I think it's very important for like leaders of the company to build a collaborative environment or culture within the company, such that like everyone, what the whole company is doing, like very transparent, to make sure like everyone knows how to prevent the data silo or like work silently.
Great. Yeah. No. And my view on it is, I think like from a data perspective, I think a lot of companies actually have a lot of data. They actually may have even more data than they needed, and definitely that they will use, right? So, but however, I think it's very important that for the different departments or people to really identify like what's the use case, right? What are the things that they need data for to support the work that they do, right? And based on that, then we figure out, hey, what are the different data that we need to get, right, or consume, right? So I think that's an important thing that companies or people need to do within the organizations. And another thing I think is that a lot of the data, right? Well, it can be like some data that you collected from your customers, like pretty straightforward. But some data can also be derived. We actually classify as like many types of data, right? First, be it as we talked about, customer filling out a profile, or a customer performing a transaction or viewing your web pages. You can collect those data as well. To even enriching those data by deriving, hey, if I have, let's say in a loyalty program, pass some points to maybe my wife, not Kevin, right? I probably cannot do that. I can start to derive, hey, maybe these people have relationship, or where am I buying things, where am I shopping things? You can derive where I work, where where my home is. So basically, I think what I wanted to say is identifying the use case and then think about the data that you need, and then you can actually piece together from many different channels, right? The data that you can collect. But then what I also would suggest is that there's no we cannot do that in one go, right? There's so much data, and we wanted to, actually progressively build on top of it. Because if you are trying to make sense of all the data you have, it will probably take a year, 2 years, it will take a long time. But we can actually add on, piece by piece, when we continue to move forward on the journey, right? So, start with something small, add on to it, and then not even of your first-party data, you can even add third-party data to enrich it as well. So that's how I see for growth, yeah.
Alan, just one thing call it the word of caution, right? We a lot of times talk about we need to have additional data into our data storage, whatever it is, and might even be silo data storage. And I would call it offensive data. Getting more and more data in, you can make better decisions, you understand customers better, etc. We get all of that. What I see specifically in large organizations where the issue sits is the fact that we have duplicative data already, which we start to work from, which we then need to reconcile, sometimes we don't, and then we start on the wrong footpath. Because we start to create data sources and we start to create sorts of ideas about where we can go based on the wrong setting. So I would argue, let's first make sure our foundation is right. That means not just technical, right? It means definition-wise, in a data governance, data lineage, all of the components that you imagine. And from there, you start moving towards the future. I see quite often that we want to move to the future while we don't have everything in order to begin with.
Great. All right, go ahead.
Another aspect of looking into the data carefully is that, especially for the consumer-facing like us, it's really interesting to see how when we do a customer survey and customers interview, what they actually say and actually do are totally different in some cases. So let's say some users say, I'm a value seeker, and we always go to the discount stores and never buy anything that's really off the price. But then they end up being a lot of purchases at the convenience stores and 7-Eleven. So I'm no blame for those stores, but it's just it's not discounted. So I think what they actually say or try to behave, and they actually do, so their actual behaviors are identified by the data. So I think, trying to identify what they're saying and what they're actually doing, I think that digging into the data is really important exploration.
Can I step in Alan's moderator shoes for a bit and ask Xin a question about that? So that's a very important point, right? How do you, because A/B testing and all of that is sort of proven best practices. Now, with what you said, how do we go beyond that and really test against? And the outcome is that we want a set of sound assumptions to work on. So how do you do that at Kiosk?
Well, we always have a hypothesis, right? So hypothesis and try to test it out. And I think we also listen to what the customers say and customers' feedback, and also identify into the data. So on the survey, if that's the right response, and we also check with the data that's actually working in the data or the actual behaviors. So, and then, depending on the answers from both directions, it really depends on how we want to iterate on. Of course, it's not a right or wrong answer, how we can just take it from there. So I think it's just a continuous process throughout the companies. So I think having all those consolidated goal state in terms of customer success is very key, as Kevin mentioned at the beginning. I think that's what we do at the company.
Right. Yeah. No, data is always like a big topic, and we can usually go on for a long time on that, right? Be it on the control side, the governance, the leverage, and everything. Great. So, one more question that I really wanted to ask, right? And because just now we talked about data and putting customer in the middle and everything, but one thing we haven't touched on yet is the digital channels, right? Because as we live right now, digital channels are becoming more and more prominent, right, in our lives, right? And what I wanted to ask is, how are we going to leverage these digital channels, right, to build a journey, right, putting customer again in the middle, right, it's customer-centric to build such journey. Rachel, I definitely want to ask you on that. I suppose you're the expert in the digital channel side of things, right?
Yeah, sure. So I think it links back to the first question. So as you mentioned, I think digital, especially mobile, has already become like a very core part of everyday's life, right? So you mentioned a lot of companies, a lot of finance companies have digital channel department, innovation department on how to build in your existing customer journeys or core functions onto a digital channel or digital interface. But I think with mobile or digital become more and more important in daily life, I think we should take a step back is how to infuse this into the core function instead of as a standalone function and treat it as an extension for what you are offering now or a building now. So it should be a core part or core DNA of every single function when you build your customer journey. So this is what we have been practicing in Meta, and then I recommend our partner to do that as well.
Right. Roel?
Yeah, so the one thing around, if you think about it, right, digital journeys, digital channels, it's great that we have them, and we see with the pandemic that we use them even more, and our customers use them even more, but it's quite fundamental. What you see quite often in what organizations do is they have their regular channels. For a bank, it might be a branch. And instead of having customer go to the branch, we use the web channel or we use the mobile. And we think that's okay. In most cases, it's not. If you're going to use your digital channels, you need to start with what's your product. And once you've got your product, you need to define your customer journeys for digital channels. And they will be different. It's different to buy a mortgage in a branch than whether it is buying a mortgage online. So what are the things you need to change? So instead of adding a channel, which we quite often do, and we make it multi-channel or omni-channel, it's all about really fundamentally look back at the customer journey, starting from a customer lens perspective, once more in terms of, but what do I need to do then? And it might be that digital comes to the forefront, and it's not your physical channels anymore, for instance. And I don't see a lot of organizations do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think two thoughts on that, right? First of all, yesterday we had a great presentation from L'Officiel CEO. L'Officiel is our magazine arm, digital magazine arm in France, as part of AMTD Group. So he said 100 years ago, in 1920, print is a technology. Today, print is not a technology. So I think the same thing applies to mobile phones or digital, what we call digital today. I think today it is increasingly, if not already so, it's not a technology anymore. People expect things to be done on the digital touch point as a minimum standard, right? That's number one. Second is the meaning of channel is really starting to shift, and that is driven by the advancements in data analytics, perhaps AI in the next 3 to 5 years to come. The implication is that channel is really, it means different, it's a different channel for every audience, right? If you look at the 100 people sitting here, every one of you, if you go on the same site and there's an ad banner, you're probably going to see a different set of ads. And that is increasingly prevalent and important. That has implications for all of our businesses, right? In marketing or any vertical. So it's really about contextualizing things and supplying the solution in a way that precisely matters to that specific audience. So Shin really liked this, what I said yesterday about Elon Musk. I'm going to say it again. What he said when he acquired Twitter on his letter to the advertisers, he said, low relevancy ads are spam, high relevancy ads are actually content. And that's very true. So we have kind of crossed the Rubicon nowadays in that the outcomes are now binary. If your solution or what you bring in front of your target audience is not relevant to them, it's zero, it's garbage, it's meaningless, right? Think about it. If you get a call from a marketer at the wrong time, the wrong place, selling you a solution you don't want or need, you don't take that call. You just shut it down. But if you get an ad in front of you right when you need it, you just had a marriage, you just moved into a house, you want that home insurance, you know the insurtech provider knows that you need it before you realize the need to, because you've got so many things running around. That's potentially something a magic formula. So I'll pause there.
Great, sure.
Yeah, so speaking about digital channel, I think coming from my banking backgrounds, that the bank I used to work, is retail, wholesale, and digital. And so the departments are totally divided, and the retail is supposed to have the digital context in it, but the departments, it's divided that way. And I think if the bank decides to have the actual branch, then the customer journey or working backwards of the ideal customer experience and path needs to be embedded into those two components. So the best customer journey, if we have the actual branch of the bank, then it might start with the digital, but then because that we have the branch, so somewhere in the path, like why not leveraging that actual branch to support in better way and much more like a holistic ways. So I think it's not only everything is going to go digital, but rather I think it really needs to be a hybrid experience or the customer experience journey that the company seeks for. So I think having all those components hybrid and together is very important things to think about.
Great, no, and I like very much what you guys talk about. For example, like Kevin, you talk about building that foundation, right? There's a bare minimum that you need to cater to right now as well too, right? And also the use case of we'll also need to then tie to be it the product or the people that you're trying to sell to, and be more cater to leveraging the channels to cater to it, right? Because sometimes it can be digital, but sometimes you may also still need to leverage the experience side of things, of like really physical experience sometimes, and being a mixture. But I also really it's about, but at the end of the day, it's being personalized, right? We need to be personalized and cater to the people that we are selling to, right? And the good thing is it ties to the whole conversation we had today, right? For example, about the data, right? How can we be personalized without piecing together all the data silos that we just talked about and making sense of those data of who your customer really is, right? So no, I think basically I think those are the cores of building a strong customer-centric experience. So with that said, thank you so much for today. I mean, I myself learned a lot from you guys, and hopefully our audience have as well too. And thanks so much for I know some of you have actually commute to Hong Kong for this, so thank you very much for coming over.